Rossana, based on your experience, what advice can you give to civil engineering leaders listening on turning personal adversity into a catalyst for positive change within their teams and within their organizations? That's what you've gone through.
Right. I mean, my story is unique in the sense that it's about a specific plane crash that changed me and my family. But all of us, right? We all go through some level of adversity throughout life. And it's a matter of us not losing sight of, these personal tragedies, whatever they may be. And like you said, turning it into an opportunity to inspire others, to be catalysts for change, and to find opportunities to bring our team along.
Imagine losing a sibling in a plane crash and then taking that grief and turning it into a passion to help leaders develop through personal adversity. Well, that's what my guest today did. Rossana D'Antonio is a licensed professional engineer. She's also an executive director at EnvSP, and she has a book coming out called 26 Seconds, which talks about her experience of losing her brother to a plane crash and how she has really made it a passion of hers since then to help people grow as leaders, because we all deal with some kind of personal adversity. And in this episode, she talks about how you can use adversity to grow as a leader. She also talks about how some of the things you can do with engaging with other people in your career, whether it's through advisory councils or public sector, private sector work, all these different experiences and different stories that you share and learn from others help you to grow as a leader. It's a really inspirational episode, and I can't wait for you to meet Rossana today. I'm Anthony Fasano, and this is the Civil Engineering CEO Show. All right, now I'd like to welcome our guest onto the show for today. Rossana D'Antonio is a licensed professional engineer. She's also the executive director at EnvSP. And Rossana, I want to welcome you to the Civil Engineering CEO Show.
Thank you, Anthony. Thanks for having me.
No, we're happy to have you. And maybe to start off, you can tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what you do in your role as executive director at EnvSP on a daily basis.
Yeah, so thank you for that. So my background is I'm a civil engineer and I'm a registered geotechnical engineer in the state of California. I spent 33 years in the public sector working for Los Angeles County Public Works, which is the largest public works agency in the nation. I grew up in the organization and I was able to be a deputy director. That was my final assignment in public works. Which means that I was fortunate enough to be able to lead two business areas, municipal services and emergency management business area. And then after 33 years, I decided to leave county service with the intent to retire, believe it or not, but I don't think we ever actually retire. And I got an opportunity to join the EnvSP family. And EnvSP is a global consulting firm which offers a full services of engineering and consulting services. And so I was getting very comfortable not having a job, but they were very, very persuasive. So I joined them, and here I am. I now get to see the other side of the industry, which is the private sector. I've never actually worked in the private sector. So as an executive director, I have the opportunity to interact with government agencies to be able to provide services to them, especially in this very challenging times that we are right now with extreme weather events and getting a lot of funding from the federal government for public infrastructure. And so it's a matter of using my networks to be able to provide services that EnvSP has in this era of workforce shortage. So that's essentially, in a nutshell, where I'm at now professionally.
That's great. So, Rossana, you have a book coming out. It's called 26 Seconds. It touches on profound grief and purpose. Can you tell us a little bit about the book and how the experience that goes along with it influenced your professional mission?
Yeah. So in 2008, May 30th, 2008, my family experienced a tragedy. It revolved around a plane crash. My younger brother was a airline captain, and he was the captain of of TACA Flight 390, which overshot the runway in Honduras, a notoriously very dangerous airport called Toncontin International Airport in Honduras. It so TACA 390 overshot the runway and crashed into an embankment, killing my brother and 4 others in that aircraft. And so at the time, well, just in general, I don't know if your viewers know that 70% of airplane crashes are deemed to be pilot error, and this statistic just blew me away, and I just suspected that my brother would be made a scapegoat for this crash. And so I set off. The book is all about me setting off in search of the truth of what happened to attack of Flight 390. And along the way, so this has been a 15-year journey. It started out as a grief memoir, but along the way, I decided to incorporate several of the other plane crashes that we've heard of in that time frame. So, Miracle on the Hudson, Air France 447, the Boeing debacle, with the 737 Maxes, and then some of the just most recent plane crashes that we've seen, here here nationally. And so what I discovered is that, the aviation industry is under strain and, fortunately, so it's the book is in 3 parts. One is my search for answers, then I incorporate all these other incidents, and then finally I find the truth not only to my story, TAC 390, but also, you know, arriving at a conclusion that the aviation industry is under strain, and we're seeing it every single day. I mean, there's not a day that goes by that we don't see some sort of aviation mishap or plane crashes. And so it it isn't as simple as us saying pilot error. We have a very complex system that consists of the manufacturers, right, which is a duopoly with Boeing and Air France. We have the operators, which are the airlines. We have maintenance issues. We have the regulators, which is FAA. We have infrastructure, which is right up our alley as engineers. And then, of course, we have consumers. And every single day, with every takeoff and every landing, each one of these components in the system need to work in tandem, hand in glove. And what we're seeing is that that doesn't always happen. So, essentially, that the story is about my experience with the aviation industry and how we've arrived at this point, and the importance in advocating for infrastructure investments and aviation safety, which is this newfound purpose that I have as a result of this tragedy.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry to hear about your tragedy, but I'm grateful that you're trying to turn it into something greater, like you said, really purpose for yourself to make a change in some of these areas that will have an impact, certainly on society in a positive way. Rosanna, based on your experience, what advice can you give to civil engineering leaders listening on turning personal adversity into a catalyst for positive change within their teams and within their organizations? That's what you've gone through.
Right. I mean, my story is unique in the sense that it's about a specific plane crash that changed me and my family. But all of us, right? We all go through some level of adversity throughout life. And it's a matter of us not losing sight of, these personal tragedies, whatever they may be. And like you said, turning it into an opportunity to inspire others, to be catalysts for change, and to find opportunities to bring our team along. I mean, I just got back from DC yesterday. I joined another 260 of my colleagues from the American Society of Civil Engineers. We were on the Hill, on Capitol Hill, advocating for infrastructure investments. And one of the things that, the trainers will do is to encourage us to use our personal stories as a means for connecting a very, you know, a topic which is like infrastructure with a human perspective. And that, not only will that help us inspire our legislators, which are responsible for the purse strings in these causes that we bring to them. But yeah, also making sure that that helps inspire our teams, right? It's all about each one of us has something to talk about. And so it's a matter of finding those personal stories, those human stories that connect us from one human being to another.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that talking to people, sharing stories with others is such an important part of growth, whether it's personally or professionally. I know here at EMI, we've started to incorporate it on our team meetings, like share your personal journey, your personal career
Right.
story. What's something that you've learned in your life? And, I may have worked with someone for 10 years, but I had no idea that they went through that in their life. And I think that that's really interesting and it opens us up to different conversations and points of growth. So
Right.
I absolutely think that as a leader, if you're going through adversity, number one, there's probably something you can learn from it and bring back to your team. But also, there's probably something you can learn by sharing it with your team and sharing your experience. So I think that there's a lot from a leadership perspective that can be done there.
Yeah.
So, Rosanna, at EMI, we like to kind of really investigate leadership and leadership transformation. You said earlier that you spent over 3 decades at Los Angeles County Public Works and you led through high pressure emergency scenarios. What were some of the most transformative moments that shaped your leadership style? And how did those experiences influence you, how you lead maybe in crisis or maybe just in everyday situations?
Yeah. So, as a civil engineer, I was trained in that arena, right? In civil and geotechnical engineering. And so as I grew up in the organization, that was what I immersed myself on. When I became a deputy director, I was given the assignment of being the deputy director over emergency management, which is something that I had 0 experience in. And so just the label was daunting in and of itself. But I accepted the challenge and during the 6 years that I led this business area, I led, the response, recovery, and rebuilding for several typical natural disasters. So whether they be earthquakes, which are, infamous here in California, wildfires, which has become infamous just nationwide, and floods. And so it kind of seemed like a natural progression from the engineering arena. There were other atypical disasters, human made disasters that we responded to as well, like civil unrest, like what happened after the George Floyd killing. And then obviously the pandemic response, where we, as public works workers, were deemed to be essential workers, essential services. And so we had to make sure that we continued to deliver on these essential services while still keeping our staff safe. But I mean, as I look back, I think the number one disaster that really impacted me, both professionally as well as personally, was the Woolsey wildfire of 2018, where I was the incident commander for the response, the recovery, and the rebuilding of an entire community that impacted Malibu, the city of Malibu, and the unincorporated county area adjacent to the Malibu city. So I was the incident commander, but my home was also in the direct line of fire, literally speaking. And so we were
Wow.
evacuated for over 3 weeks while attending to the disaster itself. And so what I learned there, which, truly has been transformational, is first of all, these natural disasters are going to continue to happen. And we see them more frequently with a much greater intensity. And it is truly an extreme climate event that is now year round. And so, how do we develop resilience not only within the community, but as individuals? We all have a responsibility. We can't just rely on the disaster to hit and then us go to government and expect that government will actually solve all our problems. As individuals, we make a choice on where to live. And we need to be aware of what some of those hazards are. And we need to make sure that we are prepared to, when that disaster hits, how to survive, beyond that. So that was probably one of the biggest things. And then dealing with the community itself. people lose everything, right? And it's no longer just about the actual structure, but everything that comes within that structure. And we need to help these individuals start anew, start from scratch to rebuild and put their lives back together again. So that was pretty transformational for me. It was the human side of what the services that we provide that put things everything into perspective. I mean, as engineers, our mission is to protect and safeguard the health, safety, and welfare of the public. And those are simply words until we're actually faced with a life and death scenario like the Woolsey wildfire. In addition to that, we it was kind of like the first of its kind type of wildfire in this region, so we didn't really have a playbook to go by, and so we were kind of figuring things out on the fly. So developing policies, you know, what are we going to, um, enforce with regards to building codes? What are we gonna force these community members to implement going forward? How can they be more resilient with a hardened home? So those types of things, and we set policies that are now that now serve as a model for the current wildfires that we're responding to here in Pacific Palisades, in Altadena, and in Malibu, which have been at a much greater scale, but the models that we developed back in 2018 and 2019 can be scaled up to be able to be implemented with what's going on now.
It's interesting because as I hear you talk about some of these experiences, when you go to school for civil engineering, which we both did, this is not what you get taught.
Exactly.
I mean, you get taught the calculations and the reports and the analysis, but you don't get taught how to deal with the human side of engineering and things that happen in engineering. And so I can see how it can be so transformative when you deal with wildfires and something like COVID, where, like you said, these are things that haven't been experienced before. So, number one, there's engineering issues you have to deal with. Number two, there's human issues that you have to deal with. And then number three, you have to think about how to safeguard against this the next time around now that you know that something like this can potentially happen. So
Exactly.
I think from a leadership perspective, there's really a lot of growth that can happen there because you're dealing with so many different things that I would have to imagine, it almost like from a confidence perspective, if you can get through something like that, you feel like, man, if I can get through that, I'm really equipped to be able to handle different types of situations now as a leader.
Right, exactly. I know. And yeah, and we're seeing it, every single day. When I work with a lot of young people, and they are the school to the school's credit. So I serve on an advisory capacity for some of our colleges here in the LA region, and the schools are actually asking the professionals what skills. I have a product which is, I'm going to be graduating these students. What, as the industry, what is it that you want to see in from a skills perspective for me as a teacher to teach them, right? And so I think the graduating classes of today are much better prepared than my graduating class was, 30 some odd years ago. We were a lot more confined to the technical skills. So I have to give colleges and universities a lot of credit in the fact that the product, which is now these entry level engineers, are much better prepared. I mean, from a communication standpoint, just they're much more well rounded. They are hungry for leadership opportunities. And so I think in that way, I think kids are much better equipped to deal with some of the challenges that we're facing today. But you're right, there's still that human element that I think is not taught in schools, and that's probably something that we just can't, we must expect that as leaders in the industry, we must be the ones to teach these entry level engineers the different aspects of what we do and how it affects everyone's lives.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big part of when we do our project management training programs here. We focus a lot on stakeholders and stakeholder involvement because you got to deal with people that live on the property, live next to your properties, right? It's not just about scope, schedule, budget. There's other aspects of it. So that's all important stuff. So Rosanna, you've also worked on national advisory councils. Talk about how some of those experiences maybe have influenced your leadership approach in the work you're doing today, especially when you're tackling climate resilient solutions and things of that nature.
Yeah, so I was very fortunate last year to be appointed to the President's National Infrastructure Advisory Council, specifically on a committee, the Recovery and Resilience Committee. And I worked with another 10 or 12 representatives nationwide from different arenas. We weren't all engineers. And our task was to come up with recommendations for the president, for the White House, with regards to how to help FEMA become more efficient and how to help develop more resilient standards and policies across the nation. So in 2023, we had about one national disaster every 2 weeks to the tune of $1 billion each disaster, if you can imagine that. And we don't expect it to get any better. And FEMA was expected to respond to all of these disasters, so they just couldn't keep up with the staffing and the resources that they have. And so the question was, is this sustainable, and do we want to make recommendations to help FEMA focus truly on what they were meant to focus, and maybe have some of the states become more self-sufficient as some of these disasters continue to exacerbate. And so it was interesting because what you do is you bring all these different diverse voices to the table who all have something to contribute and from a different perspective, which simply highlights that as we face some of these daunting challenges going forward, that's what you're going to need. You're going to need a complete diverse team that is completely different from where I come from, but has something to contribute to the overall response and solution. We can no longer do it again alone. We can't do it from a state perspective. We can't do it from a local agency perspective. We truly need to bring all these diverse voices together to contribute to find a solution. And at the end of the day, we prepared a comprehensive report that ranged, I think there was like 20 recommendations, ranging from the federal government to the state to the local agency down to the individual level. As basic as, recommending that people have, you know, a insurance policy that truly protects them when the disaster comes, because the disaster will come. And so, from a leadership perspective, that's something that can be implemented at any scale, wherever you are, right? You want to make sure nobody's voice gets left behind because somebody, wherever, like where you least expect it, could have something very compelling to contribute to the overall problem and the overall solution.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think being involved on advisory councils like that is a really good thing for civil engineering professionals to do. As you can kind of hear from Rosanna's answer there, you learn quite a bit. You interact with a lot of different people, right? You get different perspectives and you can kind of bring them all back to your job, which, and what we do is so important because you are going to deal with different emergencies, if you will. And all these different experiences and even these relationships and these connections that you're building are all going to come into play when you do have to deal with things like that. So I definitely would recommend kind of pushing yourself a little bit and trying to get involved in some things like that outside of your job if possible. So, Rosanna, let's talk about civil engineering globally for a minute here. You're an ASCE board member, you're an advocate for international collaboration. How do you see the civil engineering profession evolving globally, particularly around sustainability, workforce development, and licensure as we move forward here?
Yeah, thank you for that. So, I've always believed that we as an industry, and actually in responding to some of these challenges that we now are responding to, we the world is getting smaller, if you will. We are more interconnected than we've ever been. Natural disasters don't know of geographic boundaries. And so, like I said, we can't really do it alone. And at this point, I think just we need to reach out um, across complete nations and bring together. like I said, diverse voices that come from completely different countries. I mean, right now we are seeing just at a global level how these extreme weather events are affecting, nations across the world. Right? We've got countries that will require to be rebuilt just because of the circumstances that they're in. And so, and as engineers, we all have a role in that. And so, I had the opportunity last year. So to participate as a delegate in a group that was working on developing a mutual recognition agreement. So back in 2023, President Biden and Prime Minister Sunak signed the Atlantic Declaration, which was meant to strengthen the relationship between our two nations with regards to trade and commerce. And one of those things was to work on recognition of licensure between our two nations. So right now, if I want to work in the UK, I have to go and submit myself to all the licensing requirements that they have, and they must do the same thing here. So we wanted to make sure that we streamline that a little bit, precisely to address the workforce crisis that we're all going through. And so that's nothing new here. We don't have enough engineers for the amount of work that needs to be done. And so, like I said, because we are more interconnected, we wanted to make sure that we provided the opportunity to have our engineers be able to go back and forth between our two countries and be able to practice in a more efficient manner without the constraints. And so the NCWS, which is the National Council for Engineering Examinations, and the Engineering Council in the UK, um, worked on developing this agreement and invited the state boards to participate. So I, as a board member for the California Board of Professional Engineers, Land Surveyors, and Geologists, I represented California along with our executive director for the board, along with 12 other state representatives. And we went to the UK to become familiar with their licensing process. And they already knew about our process because they were very interested in trying to get this conversation started. What we learned is that they are obviously their engineers are very, very well prepared, and we could develop a draft agreement that would allow, you know, the UK engineers to come here and be able to comply with our requirements without necessarily additional obstacles. And we could do the same thing in going to the UK and becoming licensed in the UK with being able to practice. So, from a global perspective, this was a solution that didn't exist before. It will help streamline operations and engineering services for both our countries. It'll help with the investments for both our nations, and it'll actually help create jobs. So it's a win-win. There was really no downside to it. We now have 27 states that have committed to participating in the agreement, and we actually have 7 states that have already started licensing engineers from the UK. So again, we are a much smaller world, if you will. We're much more connected than we have ever been. The challenges are cross geographic boundaries, and we need to find solutions that'll help address these issues, these challenges by removing some of the current obstacles. The same thing goes for my role in the American Society of Civil Engineers. As a board member, we work on developing tools at a global network. As a matter of fact, ASCE has over 165,000 members worldwide. And so some of the solutions, some of the standards that we develop get used outside of the United States. And it's a matter of making sure that we are driving the industry with tools and mechanisms that can help all of us address the current challenges.
I think that's great. I think that's a great example that you gave with the UK. I mean, to me, that's a real tangible example. Like a lot of times you'll hear people say, oh, well, we got to work more with other countries, but this is a real tangible where we're making an agreement and we're going to be able to, maybe, have engineers from the different countries work in the other countries, in a process for that. So that's great to hear that there's some progress like that. And I
Yeah.
do think that if we're going to be able to tackle challenges globally as civil engineers. Those are the types of things that we're going to need to do to facilitate that and to make it easier for civil engineers in one part of the world to help civil engineers in another part of the world. And it's great that ASCE and other organizations are focused on that. So, Rossana, you've got an interesting and I guess variety of different backgrounds in terms of technical expertise, public service. You worked in the private sector now, you've done advocacy. I want to talk a little bit about mentorship because you mentioned earlier, like, you don't learn everything in school. Some of it has to be taught through, mentorship and learning on the job and things of that nature. So, how do you approach mentorship and developing the next generation of civil engineering leaders yourself? How do you approach that?
Yeah, so it's interesting that you say that. Like I said, I just got back yesterday from DC. We were advocating on the Hill for infrastructure investments, and we had brought together 260 civil engineers from across the nation. And what ASCE does is you team up senior folks like me will team up with junior folks, and then you go and talk to your legislators about the causes and the priorities that ASCE is advocating for. And surprisingly, we have a very active young member participation in this event as well as other events. ASCE is has determined that one of our priorities must be to prepare the next generation because our job is only to is a seat warmer, right? We are here for a limited amount of time. We provide our input, we make a difference, and then we pass the baton to the next generation. And it behooves us to prepare them to be ready to take on some of these roles that we now are leading. And so as we embarked on our visits, one of the things I like to do is I like to empower the younger members to be able to lead some of these smaller meetings, perhaps with one of their representatives, and we give them talking points. We actually practice, and then we allow them as the legislator and the constituent to have a conversation. And we're there, so they don't feel that they're off on their own. We're a safety net. We're there. We're having like you and I are having a conversation, same thing. The constituent, one of our younger members is talking with our legislator, and we're having this conversation about what's important, what we need, what needs to be advocated for. And then if there's something that they can't answer, if there's a trick question that comes and maybe they just feel a little like I don't have the answer, we're there to help them, respond to the current question that may be on the table. I think that the best way to learn is through observation. And so that's one way to train to help the next generation be prepared for when it's their time to lead. So I guess the short answer would be to empower younger members, empower them, um, recognize what their skills are, their strengths are, build on those, and then fill in the gaps for the skills that they perhaps don't quite have or the experience that they don't quite have at this point, and empower them, give them opportunities to build on that because I mean at the end of the day, they're the ones that are gonna they're the future of our profession and the future of our society just in general.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, people learn best by doing. And if you can encourage them and push them to lead a meeting or get involved right away where they're putting themselves out there a little bit, which will be uncomfortable probably in the beginning, but it's really going to help them grow and help them build their confidence, which is everything in leadership. So
Correct.
I really love that approach.
Yeah.
All right. So the last question I have for you, Rosanna, is what kind of last key piece of advice here can you offer to civil engineering leaders who aspire to really leave a lasting impact on their organizations and on the communities that they serve based on, your leadership experience to date?
Yeah. So, one of the things that I I really react to with what's going on in leadership right now at the highest levels in federal government is that I really don't see courage. I think that with leadership comes the need for you to be brave, to implement change, to do the hard things, to embark on a path where you don't necessarily have the answers. I mean, in my opinion, this is what leadership is all about. And if you want to leave a lasting legacy, you're going to have to do the hard things. you're going to have to recognize that, if you have the answers, somebody already did it. That's not going to be your legacy. And so I always tell people, m- you know, surround yourself with smart people. People you don't necessarily need to know all the answers. I think as we step into, fresh into a leadership role, we always think I need to know everything, and that is so far from the truth. Big things get done by teams, and you need to surround yourself with smart people, people with diverse voices, people who will tell you the truth, who will challenge you as it relates to, "Hey, you didn't think about this," or "Maybe we should do it this way." Keep an open mind and have the courage to do the really hard things. I mean, we are faced every single day with challenges that are something we've never seen before. And so it's going to take a team with courage and leadership to develop implementations that will make us feel uncomfortable at times, but it's really, really necessary if you truly want to leave a lasting legacy. So, yeah, that's how I've been very successful, by surrounding myself with people who have challenged me in a good way, respectfully, to think about all the things that perhaps, I may not have thought of. And, yeah, that's what I would do.
It's great. And I really like it. It's the idea of surrounding yourself with smart people, kind people, people that'll help develop you. And like you said, doing the hard things, right? I mean, I think that's a really good way to sum up leadership because, you know, anyone could do the easy things, but
Right.
we know in the world of civil engineering that there are a lot of hard things that need to be done and need to be tackled, and
Yeah.
doing them is what makes for great leadership. So once again, Rossana D'Antonio, she is a licensed professional engineer, a registered geotechnical engineer in California, executive director at EnvSP, and her forthcoming book, 26 Seconds, Grief and Blame in the Aftermath of Losing My Brother in a Plane Crash, will be available soon. You can actually go to her website, rossanadantonio.com. There you can pre-order the book, and we'll put a link to the website and a link to Rossana's LinkedIn profile in the show notes here, so you'll be able to access them. Rossana, I know you're incredibly busy, so we're grateful that you spent a few minutes here with us to share some of your career, wisdom and experience with us. And I wish you all the best with the book and everything you're doing.
Thanks, Anthony. Thanks for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Rossana. She went through a lot, but I'm grateful that she's now sharing what she learned through her grief experience with others to help them grow as leaders. And I think the way she summed it up with this whole idea of surrounding yourself with really good people and doing the hard things is a great recipe for leadership, not just in engineering, but in life. If you enjoyed the interview, please subscribe to our channel here. We put out videos like this on a weekly basis to help engineers become better managers and leaders. I'll see you next week.